What the
Hi, and welcome to Hollywood Impact. My name is Christian. This is Caleb.
Hello.
If you haven't seen us before, then welcome. And if you have, welcome back. This is the second time that I think that we've gotten to do this, just you and I.
Yeah,
if you haven't seen that, we did Alien Romulus like weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
But today, we're not here to talk about that. We are here to talk about Megalopolis.
Yes.
I hope I pronounced that correctly.
I think
that
that's
is right.
Yes, Megalopolis.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, starring Adam Driver, that one guy from The Mandalorian who has a very long name.
Yes. Gus.
Aubrey Plaza, Shia LaBeouf, and Missandei from Game of Thrones.
Yes.
That's just how I know her. We're going to go ahead and get right into it. This is spoiler-free, so keep that in mind. This is one of the strangest movies I think I have ever consumed.
I agree. I think the trailers very much do not depict what the core of the movie is like.
Agreed. It shows nothing.
Yeah, based off of just the trailers alone, I thought it was a completely different genre. And so going into the movie, and we'll talk about this later, but the first third of the movie completely threw me for a loop. One, just because it's very strange and jumbled by itself, but two, because the genre and type of movie that it is totally not what I was expecting based off of the couple of trailers that I saw from it.
Right. I agree. The trailers they were intriguing, but I didn't really understand what was going on. And for not most of the movie, for like half the movie, I also didn't understand what was going on. And that is both to its benefit and detriment.
Yes.
And I think that we will get into that. But like, just for context sake, this movie, I think currently, it may change, but it was currently sitting at about a 50% on Rotten Tomatoes, which means that most of the critics are pretty split on it. And I get it. I get
100%.
Why. Because this is not everyone's movie.
This is absolutely in my opinion, going to become a cult classic. It's going to be one of those movies, like you said earlier, if you're in a group of people talking about your favorite movies, there's going to be that one movie nut who always mentions Megalopolis as his number one.
I love Megalopolis.
Right. Which is not a bad thing, but like you said earlier, it's not going to appeal to a ton of people. But I think it is interesting enough that it will have a strong cult following.
I think the enjoyment of the film will heavily rely on whether you like metaphors and analogies and a lot of like conceptual, more outside the box thinking type movies.
100%.
For sure.
Yeah. I really liked the acting. I didn't find any scenes where anybody was acting out of character. There were no lines delivered strangely or anything like that. Overall, good picks for the actors. I feel like they were all cast well. The one thing that I will say negatively in regards to casting is Aubrey Plaza's character. I feel like nowadays, any movie or show that she's in, she's very heavily typecast, and this was no exception. So it was a little boring not seeing any sort of a different type of character from her.
Yeah.
Everybody else, though, seemed to fit into their roles just fine. I will say Adam Driver's performance and his character, very good pairing with that actor and that character.
I agree.
And the other notable thing I'll say is Shia LaBeouf. This was a performance from him that I don't think I've seen anywhere else.
He was kind of a standout.
He was a standout. This was a different kind of character for him, and he pulled it off really well, in my opinion. I
agree.
Acting, really good, in my opinion.
Yes, I agree. And I mean, I've seen him in the Peanut Butter Falcon, which you haven't seen that movie?
I have not. I've heard really good things about it, though.
It is a great movie. Go and watch it. He's got some acting chops. But another thing is there is a lot of good, like, surprising twist moments in this movie.
Yes.
They kind of, like, caught me off guard.
Absolutely. I jumped a couple of times.
There was one time where...
One specific moment that made me physically jump in my seat. It was really good.
Yes. I saw it. I felt it.
Yes.
And it was definitely very jarring. But that was another good part about the movie.
Very, very unexpected twists a couple of times. For sure. Let's see. One thing, the biggest... Let's just go. Yes. The biggest problem for me, which I think you'll agree with, is the difference between the first third and the second, the latter 2/3 of the movie. Like I said, going into this movie right at the beginning, very jarring for two major reasons. One is because it's totally different from what I went in like expecting the movie to be. Genre-wise, stylistically, I thought it was going to be a completely different movie story-wise. So that was one thing that caught me off guard. But the second, and I think more important reason that it was a little jarring is because it seemed sort of jumbled to me. It felt visually, there was a lot of stuff going on that happened. It was too much and too fast.
I agree.
And I didn't quite have enough time to, like, for my brain to actually process the visual.
To catch up to what was going on.
And let alone derive any meaning from what I was seeing on screen. The other thing, though, about the first third of the movie is not just the visuals, but the actual like content of it, the story and
the dialogue.
The dialogue was a bit strange, and it all mellowed out into a really cool latter part of the movie. The second and third acts were much easier to follow and to understand and to get invested into.
Yep.
But the first third of the movie, I definitely felt like someone had laced my drink a little bit or something like that. It felt like I've never taken acid, but I feel like that's like maybe a small bit of what acid would be like.
Maybe a small bit.
Right, yeah, like is Adam Driver taking me on a journey to the stars right now? What is going on?
There were times where like we would look at each other and go, dude, what the heck?
Yeah.
What was that?
In the luckily there wasn't too many people in the theater. Maybe a good thing or a bad thing for this movie. But yeah, there were a couple of times where we looked at each other and either laughed out loud at how strange, not even just because something was funny, but just how strange and off-putting it was.
Weird.
Wacky, yeah. Or something visually, we would look over to each other multiple times because it was so weird. But the second 2/3 of the movie
flows much better.
Much better. But what do you think about that?
No, yeah, I 100% agree, and I think that is it's not necessarily a good thing because a lot of people will always think about how a film starts, and that's definitely important for putting an impression on people. There were a couple people
I was about to say
that left the movie theater. I don't know what for.
We don't. So it could have been.
We don't know. We don't know what it is.
The people are staying.
They're eating the dogs.
They're taking the acid.
But there's a really cool core concept to this film, and I think the latter 2/3 is much better at focusing what the narrative actually means, whereas the first third is just feels like a jarred mess.
It felt like if you're like on a moving train and you jump out onto the road, those first
you
die. No,
you're done.
Those first few steps really rough. You have to try really hard to catch your balance, and it feels chaotic. And then afterwards, you can just kind of get into a little bit of a regular stride and a walk. That's sort of what the movie felt like. It felt like it was off to a really rough start, and I was honestly, before it started mellowing out, I was beginning to get a little disappointed because I thought I wasn't going to understand a lick of this movie. And then it kind of calmed down. But
yes.
Anyways.
I also liked the blending of like the modern stuff and like the Roman stuff. Very cool.
That was
very, very cool.
One of my favorite parts of the movie was the stylistic choices. The sort of, like you said, Roman and sort of early 1900s New York kind of blend together. And it was very apparent in all aspects. The clothing, the speech. Some of the characters talk in both English and in Latin, I guess it would be.
I think so, yeah.
And then the buildings as well, the architecture. So much of it was... Parts of it were blended in a way that I couldn't tell if it was cool or just like some kid had just like drawn like a Roman soldier with a business suit on or something. Like I couldn't quite tell what was elegant and what wasn't some of the time, but most of the time I thought it was cool. It was well done. So.
Yeah, I agree. When it comes to the characters, the core characters have a interesting story.
Yes.
And it's not that the side characters don't, and it's not like the side characters need to be developed too much, but I felt like they were just kind of place markers. They were purpose servers, and I didn't really get attached to some of these side characters as much as I felt like I should have. I didn't care about the stuff they were doing as much as I wanted to. But I mean, Adam Driver, he knocks it out of the park with this 100%. One. Like, acting is great. Dude is underrated actor.
Oh, absolutely. I feel like for me, the first time I really found out who he was in the Star Wars sequels. And I feel like that probably for a lot of actors would have done their career in. Is not, I mean, he did well in those movies, but I feel like just the atmosphere surrounding those movies drug him down quite a bit. However, he continues to, one after the other, bring out performances that show that, it was the movie's fault, not his fault. Yeah. For the sequels, right? This is no exception. This is a fantastic performance from him.
Yes. And most of the things I've seen him in, he's usually the best part.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen it, but Marriage Story is great. If you have not seen it, go see it. Heart-wrenching. Just a lot of emotions. But anyways, he's really good at portraying emotions, as well as he is getting in character. And so I think that should be really appreciated.
I will say, I'll add on to your points about the side characters. I agree. The main characters fleshed out very well. It was very clear to see their motivations and their goals and how they kind of played and intertwined with each other in that sense. Really cool dynamics there. The side characters, I feel like they serve a purpose, like you said, and they do that well enough. I feel like I would have liked to see a spoonful more of maybe a little bit deeper underlying motivations behind the things that the characters were doing. And on top of that, the end result of some of these side characters and their plots, either in the case of Aubrey Plaza's character, didn't really have any impact on the story, significant or otherwise. And then on Shia LaBeouf's character, it did have somewhat of an impact on the story, but it felt like it was unnecessary to have an entire character dedicated to that. It felt like it could have been portrayed in a different way. So
I agree. Yeah. And going right off that into things that have an impact, how about Hollywood impact? Who would have thought? Some noise. The bad stuff. The things that really stuck out to us in a negative fashion. I'm going to go with the first and like the obvious choice for me. They had some moments, like maybe 4 or 5, which is I think
I quite a bit closer to 6 or 7.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. That's worse.
Yeah.
Where the lines did not match up with.
It was ADR.
With what? Yeah.
They just dubbed over with other lines, and in some cases, it was somewhat subtle. Like there was one scene closer to the beginning where there's like shadows over the character's mouth.
Yeah.
And so you can't see it every time because you can't see his mouth moving completely. But then there were other times where it was very obvious. Like you noticed every time. Obviously, if we didn't notice, we wouldn't be able to talk about it. But multiple times there was ADR, and a lot of the times they weren't saying anything super relevant to the story. Yeah,
it was not like, that line has to be in this movie. It's like, no, a lot of it was very menial.
Yeah.
And I think that took me out of the movie
100,
quite a bit. And I'm sitting here thinking, come on, like everything around here is so cool. The visuals are very cool. And then you got to you have to dial it down with that.
And then the next 10 seconds, I'm thinking about why they did that. Right?
I agree.
Yeah, it takes you out.
It's something that takes you out of the film, but it doesn't take away from what the film tries to convey.
It's more of just a nitpick. It's annoying, but it doesn't impact the movie in a huge or important way.
I agree.
Yeah.
So is there anything that you didn't like?
Yeah, so I already discussed the first third of the movie, a little too jarring. I feel like this movie is, at least for me, would be really good, much better a second time through, especially the first third. So the first third, a little too jarring for a first watch through. Maybe it'll be better after a second time, maybe not.
Yes.
The other thing that I want to mention are the sex scenes. There are a couple, and it's an interesting dilemma because it feels like these scenes are important to the story. It goes into like temptation and control and things of these nature that do have significant impacts on the story, but they're a little too graphic. They're a little more graphic than necessary.
Correct.
There is some light nudity, as a warning for those of you out there. There is some light nudity. And it's just not necessary. And even the scenes without nudity, just the intensity of what the characters are doing, it feels like you don't need that level of intensity for that duration of time in order to convey the story beat. You know what I mean?
100%. Like, you can get what you want to say across without having to show everything and also show everything a little bit too long, where I'm like, okay, I get it. And then we're just kind of awkwardly like looking the other direction, being like, is it done yet? Is it done?
Oh, yeah.
And that's not really good for your film, I don't think. Now, the other two people in the room, they had their eyes on the screen, so they were doing whatever.
Right, yeah. There were multiple times we had to look away. Some of them was just because the movie was weird, and we looked at each other like, "What the heck just happened?"
Yeah.
And then other time, the other half probably was the sex scenes where we're just like,
yeah. And I'll say personally, one thing I didn't like about this film is that even though it has a great, cool core concept, cool narrative, cool story, whatever you want to call it, because I don't feel like I quite understood the movie as a whole. It's based on a book. I have not read the book. Now I kind of feel like I have to, or that I want to, and I need to rewatch this film again. And you know me, rewatchability is a huge part of my score.
Yeah.
However, in this case, it is a double-edged sword because it makes me want to watch it again, but not just for the sake of enjoyment, but for the sake of actually being able to understand.
Right.
And I don't feel like that's great, because that could turn off a lot of people immediately who want to do better things with their time, or it's like, why did I go to a movie? Why did I pay all this cash to not correctly understand what I'm doing?
Yeah.
And I don't feel like it should be a prerequisite to read the book or to... I mean, it's very niche, and that's good and bad, because you'll find your audience, which is what you were saying about how like eventually it might be somewhat of like a cult classic.
Right.
However, you're going to isolate a lot of your audiences doing that. And I
I feel like for me personally, this leans a bit more into my kind of niche a little bit. We discussed this earlier. My score is a little higher than yours in this movie. I like cerebral movies, and this is very much a cerebral movie. It was basically a gigantic metaphor with a dress on it, just constantly one after the other. A very
skimpy dress.
A very skimpy dress.
Very uncomfortable dress.
Yes, an unnecessarily skimpy dress. But it felt like every single part of the movie was very archetypal storytelling and parts of human nature brought down and distilled into their boilerplate essentials and given a really cool coat of paint on it with how the specifics of the story and the themes and like stylistically. So for me, that was really cool. I really enjoyed that, and I would love to watch this a second time. Probably not in theaters. I don't think I would pay for another time in theaters, but I would absolutely love to watch it again once it comes out on streaming, so that I can get a bit more of a deeper understanding of everything, and to just kind of tickle that part of my brain, part of my brain.
Part of the
brain. 'Cause, like I said, very cerebral, very, very thought-provoking, and I love those kinds of films. So
I do too. I mean, I love philosophical films. I love like thought-provoking stuff. Love that stuff. Even like the concept of which this movie, without spoiling anything, deals with being like a dreamer.
Yes.
And I think, as someone who is like that, I resonate with that, but I think with all the jumbled up stuff and jarring stuff that's going around it, made me less attached to what they were trying to tell me.
For sure.
And I think that will probably change maybe once I rewatch it with some subtitles. Apparently they have showings in theaters where like you can have closed captioning. Because I think that people who
like auditorily
are deaf.
impaired. Okay,
and maybe I need to get in with that crowd for these kind of movies, because Brother the First Third, I just kept looking at him and I was like,
what did they say?
What is this?
Yeah.
What am I watching?
Absolutely.
But I won't say that I didn't have an enjoyable time. It was an enjoyable enough experience that I was interested, intrigued. I was not bored.
Me neither.
For sure. But it's kind of mixed on my end.
Yeah, I agree.
So anyways, I'm ready to give it a score.
I am as well.
So I'll let you go first.
Okay. So overall, just to kind of sum it up, very cool conceptually. I feel like there was a lot of potential here for something really cool, and it just feels like they kind of sprinkled in some unnecessary things that kind of took away from the movie a little bit. But overall, the majority of the movie, and especially the underlying concept, very good. So for that reason, I'm going to give it a 7 on a first watch through. I think after a second watch through, depending on how much more of it I can understand, it could go up all the way to an 8, but I don't know for sure. So 7 at this point upon a first watch.
Okay. And responding to that, how I feel like it has a lot of interesting things that are buried underneath this pile of a mess that I would say, like a handful of things I just didn't like that were glaring, that's on top of this really interesting, thought-provoking, intriguing concept. But I think that having to rewatch this film in order to understand it is both, benefit and a detriment to it. Yeah. And because of that, I have to be honest, because I didn't leave that theater saying, "Oh man, that was a really good movie." The first thing I said was, "That was a movie." Yeah. And generally speaking, I don't think that is a particularly positive reaction. However, I am interested to dive into this a little bit more and maybe read the book and stuff. Oh, yeah. So for that reason, I'm going to give it a 6.5. It is worth a watch, but it is extremely niche, and you kind of have to be prepared going into it, because we were not prepared for
blindsided, both of us.
A lot of the stuff that happened in here. So, but that's my score.
Yeah.